Hi, my name is Martin Koehring. I'm the head of Economist Impact's World Ocean Initiative, which imagines an ocean in robust health and with a vital economy. The World Ocean Summit is an integral part of the work we do on accelerating a sustainable ocean economy. You can find out more about the initiative's work, including coverage of the key themes discussed during the summit, on our website, ocean.economist.com. Welcome to this plenary panel on connecting the silos for a healthy ocean. This year is crucial for ocean governance. Further negotiations on a high seas treaty are scheduled to take place with a potential finalization at the UN General Assembly later this year. And of course, we are all anticipating the UN Ocean Conference in June, July. The conference will focus on scaling up ocean action for Sustainable Development Goal 14. And of all the SDGs, SDG 14 has unfortunately attracted the lowest levels of investment. And this is really a missed opportunity given the ocean's importance in related areas such as climate action, food security, sustainable consumption, and others. There are also, these are all areas that Economist Impact covers and analyzes on a regular basis. This very World Ocean Summit is dedicated to achieving 2030 targets. The challenge now is to revive momentum towards SDG 14. But one of our main challenges towards the 2030 target is connecting the silos of ocean action that still exist. In this session, we'll examine the big picture for ocean governance and ocean regeneration and discuss how collaboration between government, industry, investors, scientists, NGOs, and other ocean stakeholders can help to restore ocean health. We'll share best practices, examples, expertise, and ambition, and new strategies. So I'm joined today by three excellent, very experienced panelists. So first of all, we have Tiago, Pitta and Cunha, the Chief Executive of the Oceano Azul Foundation. Then we have Richard Spinrad, the Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere and an Administrator at NOAA. And last but not least, we have Karen Sack, the Executive Director of the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance. You will find the full biographies of our panelists on the screen under this media player. There are also a few additional resources there, including links to relevant articles on ocean governance from the World Ocean Initiative. I would like to structure today's discussion in three main parts. First of all, we'll talk about the main ocean governance silos and why they are such a challenge. And then we'll talk about a couple of the kind of examples of collaborations, initiatives, best practices of cooperation to connect the silos. And finally, the 2030 goals. So kind of where are the big opportunities for collaboration to meet those ambitious targets, such as the 30 by 30 target, the ocean's role in meeting the SDGs, the ocean climate nexus, and so on. So without further ado, let's start with the first topic of our conversation, really looking at the main ocean governance silos and why they're such a challenge. So first of all, Tiago. Tiago, you have been working on ocean policies for 2 decades, and as a policymaker in the UN, the government of Portugal, the European Commission, and also as an independent consultant. In your experience, where do you see the main ocean governance silos and why do they exist?
Hi, Martin, and thank you very much for this introduction. And very good to be here at World Ocean Summit in 2022. But I would probably say that indeed, I was working at United Nations on ocean policies in the late 90s. And there was always this question of how can we integrate ocean issues across the different UN ocean agencies and so on. People should remember that the United Nations have several different agencies within its system, like the FAO, the IMO, the International Seabed Authority, the IOC of UNESCO, and others that work in a way connected with ocean action. But there is also, of course, the CBD, the Conference for Biodiversity, the Climate Change COPs, and many others. And so already at that time was very difficult. I remember that that was the idea behind creating this UN Ocean informal consultative process that takes place every year at the General Assembly, was exactly to try to join up dots between different actions. But I don't think that this has been very successful. There was an attempt to create the UN Ocean, which would be a kind of a network of these UN agencies that I referred and others. But the fact is that we are still pretty much working on different UN processes. So we work with the climate change process. We work with the biodiversity process. And we have this year in Lisbon, organized by Kenya and Portugal, UN Ocean Conference. What happens is that all this makes ocean action much more difficult than we find in other areas. And also it helps to maintain impasses. And the fact is that if we look into the last 20 years, there was not much that was decided on ocean action in terms of contributing to diminish the ocean crisis that is before us. I think that the evidence of that is that we have not managed to conclude a robust treaty for the conservation of the high seas, the so-called BBNJ. And I think that, as I said, it also allows different member states to have sometimes contradictory positions in different processes, many times because they have different representatives, because within their national ocean governances, there are also silos, because this, unfortunately, is still the norm. So I would also probably like to recall that the title of the chapter on oceans of Agenda 21 in Rio, back in '92, was Ocean Integrated Management. So this idea of integrating has been with us all along, at least for 30 years now. And I think we should recognize that international community has not managed to solve this problem. And that this problem, as I said, is probably also responsible for the lack of ocean action so far. But I would probably finish here and give the opportunity for my colleagues of panel as well to address this issue.
Thanks a lot, Tiago. And you highlighted, a couple of, these high-level issues. For example, the lack of, connecting the dots at the UN, but also, actually contradictory messages from member states, silos within governments, and the lack of progress on, the High Seas Treaty, but also on this integrated ocean management that we have been talking about for quite a while. I'd like to go to Rick now. You have worked tirelessly at NOAA and in academia to bring different ocean stakeholders together. I was honored to contribute to a book on the new blue economy you and Liesl Hoterling edited last year. They brought together oceanographers, marine policy specialists, policymakers, marine engineers, educators, economists, and so on. So really bringing the different ocean stakeholders together. First of all, what is the new blue economy, and how can leveraging the new blue economy through collaboration connect the silos?
Thank you, Martin. And it is my pleasure to be here at the World Ocean Summit. I really appreciate participating on this panel with Tiago and Karen, because I think we bring a broad and diverse perspective to this set of issues. I'm going to speak as a technocrat in that I'm in charge of the agency here that really is responsible for providing a lot of the products and services upon which policy decisions are being made. And in that context, let me talk specifically about the concept of the new blue economy. So the new blue economy is a fundamentally different concept from what we might call the traditional blue economy, in that it represents our capability and capacity for developing ocean data, information, and knowledge in a monetizable manner. So it's a knowledge-based economy, and it means to look to the ocean not for the extraction of material goods, but really for the extraction of data and information to address societal and environmental challenges. And in this context, it is the idea that we now have the capability to develop really rather sophisticated forecast capabilities for coastal nations, for coastal communities, to help them make decisions about conservation, about development of marine protected areas, about managing fisheries in a more sustainable manner. It's equally valuable to the private sector, groups like the reinsurance and insurance communities. And I would also point out it has an impact on communities such as the commercial shipping community, where more meaningful knowledge of the ocean will allow them to transport goods and services in a much more cost-effective and therefore energy effective and environmentally sustainable manner. So the new blue economy is a concept that, again, we've only been able to develop in the last few years, largely because of our technological capabilities, but it also represents an important capability for breaking down some of the silos that you alluded to. And I would say those silos include working across government, NGO, academic, and industry capabilities. Silos associated with the co-development of products and services, silos associated with just how to manage data. If a private sector data collector wants to preserve intellectual property, but the value of those data are clear to societal benefit, to protecting lives, properties, and economies, how do we work in a policy context to have access to that information to build out the new blue economy while at the same time preserving, if you will, that competitive capability? And I cannot overstate the fact that this must be done in an equitable fashion. We've got to be in a place where we are developing these important products in a way, co-developing, in a way that they are as beneficial or more so for some of the most vulnerable communities as possible. Because after all, what happens in island states, for example, is going to be critically dependent on what we are doing in some of the more developed nations. So the new blue economy really is a concept that's developed over the last decade or so, functionally made capable by the fact that we now have observational capabilities and predictive capabilities that we did not have before. But if we build it out without clear coordination and in a fully complementary manner to the policy developments, to the strategic goals, to the concepts of sustainability, that economy will not survive. So I'm eager to use the new blue economy as a tool for breaking down some of the very silos that we're discussing here right now.
Thanks a lot, Rick. And you highlighted really the opportunity here with the new blue economy, really bringing those different sectors together. I mean, you highlighted the data, knowledge-based economy, the opportunity to share better data, but also build competitive opportunities in an equitable fashion, as you highlighted. And that can then really help to connect the policy and strategic dots as well. So that's very exciting. And Karen, I wanted to go to you as well on this because, you have worked on numerous conservation issues in the ocean space, from fisheries management, in international policy to marine protected areas. You've recently also taken on the new role of Executive Director of the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance. And among other things, the Alliance works with public and private sector partners and NGOs to develop insurance and finance solutions that drive investment into coastal and marine nature-based solutions. Why do you see this as a priority now?
Well, thank you so much, Martin. It's lovely to be with you and with Tiago and Rick. I think they have really spelled this out. The ocean governance of the past was designed in silos. It was designed to have a whole series of verticals with very few horizontals that helped link different things together. And we're now in an economy and in a society where we have to link those things together, whether it's data, whether it's issues of climate risk and ocean risk, and how those actually add up into financial risk. We need to begin to mesh those different elements. And so really what we are looking at doing is looking at how we can break down those silos, bring together, private sector finance and insurance with the trillions of dollars that they have under management, public sector leaders from the G7, but also from the global south, because as Rick said, that question of equity is so absolutely critical and fundamental to how we address these issues and how we deal with the most climate vulnerable populations that are living at the coast. We've got 40% of the world's population living near the coast, almost half of the global economy created around coastlines. So how do we look at those issues and bring in as well civil society to work from the ground up? We're all sitting around the table in this kind of new multilateralism to forge the solutions that we need to see. And so what we're looking at doing is looking at how we can really, through three leading edge initiatives, bring those communities together. There's bringing in the ocean into the finance issue is so important. Just 1% of climate finance at the moment is invested into the ocean space. The Secretary General of the United Nations is calling for 50% of climate finance to be invested into adaptation. If we could get $25 billion a year focused on these coastal and marine areas and invest it into building resilience, we could make significant changes, including for those communities, but also for biodiversity and for building equity across these different communities. We're looking at really what we need to do is create a new global ocean finance architecture. And in the first instance, beginning to build the proof of concept projects, which show how investments into mangroves, salt marshes, seagrass beds have the triple bottom line of building resilience, keeping communities in place, as well as the biodiversity values that we all know are critical to achieve the goals we're looking at that Tiago discussed, as well as the understanding. And for that, we need the big data, we need communities, we need the public sector and the private sector too.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Karen. You highlighted the need to bring in finance. The opportunities are there, as you said, but currently finance isn't really harnessed as much as it could be in the ocean community. There needs to be, as you said, this new focus on a global financial architecture that incorporates the ocean much more than it does. I want to follow up a little bit as we talk about kind of examples of collaboration initiatives. You mentioned you're working on initiatives in that space, and also kind of best practice of cooperation to really connect the silos. I mean, at the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, you have this kind of a really exciting multi-sector collaboration. Already, I mean, you have kind of diverse membership, including private sector institutions, public sector leaders, civil society. So you connect the policy, the science, the business. Could you highlight kind of a few examples of how the Alliance creates partnerships for ocean resilience?
Sure. I never thought I would be this excited about insurance and finance. And as somebody who's steeped in the ocean space, it's a whole new outlook to be bringing to bear. A couple of examples which I think are really exciting is we have seen, for example, parametric insurance for coral reefs. Now, this was first initiated by the Nature Conservancy in Quintana Roo in Mexico. Actually, it was launched at an Economist World Ocean Summit several years ago. Since then, we, through AURA, have been working with the Mesoamerican Reef Fund, which works across the Mesoamerican Reef, and been looking at how to expand the application of that parametric insurance. So parametric insurance is it's an insurance mechanism that's triggered by one parameter. So, for example, wind speed. So this is how we've worked this. And I'm going to give the examples. You can see some of the partners that are coming to bear. The Inter-American Development Bank financed a study of the value of the Mesoamerican reef, the value to fisheries, to tourism, and the resilience value of the reef. Because once we understand that value, then we can begin to develop the finance products to show how we can invest in that sector. They then worked with the Mesoamerican Reef Fund and the insurance broker Willis Towers Watson, now WTW, and they developed the insurance product for 4 sites in Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and Belize, and put that out to market. It was bought, the insurance was bought by AXA Climate, and it's about an insurance product that's worth about $2.5 million a year, and the risk was taken on by AXA XL, all part of the AXA group, a huge global insurer. And what that means is if there are storms that trigger the parameter, so say a Category 3 hurricane, there will be within a couple of weeks a payout to the communities that are living along the reef in these specific areas. In advance of a storm, the Mesoamerican Reef Fund works with its partners on the ground and the municipalities to train some of the workers and the folks that live in those coastal communities to keep the reef as clean and healthy as possible. Immediately after the storm, when the tourism jobs have dried up because there's just been a storm, and of course the governments are focusing on rehabilitating the community and getting things in place, these kind of reef rescue corps get in the water and they clean the debris off the reef to help it get back and intact as quickly as possible post-storm. So they're earning money. There's a payout into the community to help keep it whole. The reef is healthier, the community is healthier, and the insurance trigger is working. So that's one example. Now, actually, what's happened since then is the Insure Resilience Solutions Fund has just invested another $1 million in expanding that to a further 7 sites in the Mesoamerican Reef. So we had Canadian government funding from AURA supporting that, and we've now got the UK's Blue Planet Fund also supporting further work there, and we're showing that it works and that it can go to other areas. So all of these partners coming together to deploy these solutions. There's one other quick example that I want to give, particularly because Rick is online with us, and it involves NOAA. And that is, again, working with AXA, working with the University of California, Santa Cruz, and Delft University. We've created a coastal risk index, which in essence is a tool for, and with NOAA data, of course, it's a tool that provides an overview for both the private sector and the public sector to see which areas globally are most at risk from habitat degradation and sea level rise in coastal areas. This is modeling forward so that you can look at an area and you can see what the potential risk is, build the resilience into those communities or those cities, or identify where we need to invest in nature-based solutions to make sure that the resilience value of those solutions are intact and keeping those communities safe.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Karen, for highlighting some of these, great examples, the parametric insurance you mentioned, bringing development banks, insurance brokers, communities together, kind of develop a new insurance product, and the example of the coastal risk index, also bringing different stakeholders together, kind of to really bridge those silos we talked about. I would also like to ask Tiago, in terms of your work and how do you see these kind of silos being broken down, the initiatives you work on. I mean, you are the chief executive of the Oceano Azul Foundation, and you work on many collaborative initiatives. The Rise Up Blue Call to Action, for example, you bring together civil society, fisherfolk, indigenous peoples, philanthropic organizations, as well as governments and corporations, of course, to build, this kind of, case for bold action to safeguard the ocean. So tell us a little bit more about how these different ocean stakeholders can be brought together in your experience, and how can we connect the silos through those collaborations?
Thank you for that question, Martin. And as Richard has said, indeed, the silos exist sometimes also between stakeholders, between different areas of action, even within the economy, because they belong to different areas of the economy. And so I would say that in the foundation, we have a model of change that is very much dominated by this idea of joining up dots between different ocean issues like oceans and climate, and that we also have the idea that we need to integrate the different areas of action. We do education, ocean literacy, we do ocean conservation, we do marine protected areas. In fact, this has been the core of our work, and we are very happy that we have just, along with the Pristine Seas program of National Geographic and the Wait Foundation, we have worked with the government of Madeira, this archipelago, a Portuguese archipelago in the Atlantic Ocean, to create the biggest no-take marine or fully protected marine protected area of the North Atlantic, which is a result of this kind of work where you join private foundations with governments, and also, of course, with other elements, because as we also work with the economics, we have a program to accelerate blue biotech startups from all over the world. And we also have a program on education in schools with children. We bring these programs with us to the area where we are building the marine protected area. This is very important for the whole society to, in a way, perceive what can be the good impact of that environmental improvement that will result out of a marine protected area. And so the education and the economy are capital there. You mentioned Rise Up, and here I should say it. Rise Up, I think it's also important because was a way as well of putting together the nature conservation, large organizations, NGOs, also foundations, also indigenous peoples federations and organizations of artisanal fishers, because we understood that we need to mobilize. We are at time to mobilize. And here, of course, I can only be very grateful also to Karen, because Karen has had a special role in the creation of Rise Up, together with Oceano Azul Foundation and Ocean Unite. And it's true that we have now this platform, which has more than 500 organizations worldwide that are trying to raise the bar of ambition of the international community, so that during 2022, we come to some conclusions that are important, some decisions, like as I spoke, the BBNJ being adopted, or the 30% of marine protected areas by 2030 being adopted officially, or even as well reduce or eliminate fisheries, harmful fishery subsidies that contribute to harmful fisheries, and so this is something that we are looking forward to watch this year, which is a great opportunity to have these decisions taken with stakeholders and civil society working alongside governments.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Tiago. You highlighted, a couple of, examples like the Madeira MPA, the biotech startups, the education aspect. But of course, with the mobilization that you have through Rise Up, it's amazing how many different stakeholders you bring together and really harnessing opportunities for collaboration. Rig, I also wanted to go to you on this question of, how to really kind of connect those silos. I mean, you mentioned earlier how NOAA is harnessing kind of the opportunities of the new blue economy and to kind of create innovative kind of collaborations between government, industry, NGOs, local communities. Where do you see the biggest opportunities to create collaborations with international stakeholders?
I love the fact that I'm following Tiago and Karen on this line of questioning, because they each brought up different sort of technical aspects of what they're doing. Tiago's example, the biotech industry. Karen, thank you for the shout out with respect to the work with NOAA on some coastal tools that are being developed. And in the spirit of connecting these silos, first thing, I think we need to think of them as cylinders of excellence, so that we can tap into those cylinders rather than isolated capabilities. And my answer really comes back again to the concept of applying tools and services toward the development of a resilient ocean, so we can support food security, energy security, water security, economic security, national security, security of global commerce. And in that framing, at NOAA, we're working a variety of different collaborations, again, on the equitable development, co-development, delivery of useful and usable ocean and climate products and services. And I've got 4 quick examples that I'll share. Obviously, we work through the mechanisms of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, the UNFCCC, the WMO. So we've got those silo breakers, if you will, that are established, and they have for decades done historic work in bringing together discussions. But my first example is working with the private sector. And in this case, what we've discovered is there's this emergent, consistent with the concept of the new blue economy, consistent private or growing community of data providers and service providers, one of which, for example, is an extraordinary new company called Saildrone, which has developed a concept for putting autonomous vehicles out in the ocean and providing data. So they're not selling hardware, they're selling data, if you will. And we've found a way through cooperative research and development agreements to actually start collecting data in areas where we might not otherwise, like in the middle of a Category 4 hurricane in the central Atlantic just a few months ago. So these kinds of cooperative developments between government and the private sector are one form of silo breakers. The other one that I'd like to talk about is in the context of the Biden-Harris agenda right now, where we are deploying 30 gigawatts of wind energy by 2030. And in order to do that in an ecologically sustainable manner, it requires breaking some silos and collaborating across government agencies, and in this case, between NOAA and the U.S. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. So NOAA has a responsibility for conservation, for stewardship. BOEM, as we call it, has the responsibility for leasing areas for development of offshore wind. And I'm delighted to point out that after a long discussion and dialogue, we've established a memorandum of understanding so that we can engage early in determining what areas are best and most appropriate for licensing and for permitting, for delivery and development of offshore wind at the same time, while ensuring that the ecological impact is minimized and that the sustainability of the ecosystems is kept paramount. A third example I'd talk about gets to the issue of equity. And in this case, how do you break down those silos in working with local communities? And at NOAA, what we have started doing is a series, we've now done 8 of these, of climate and equity roundtables, focused both on geography and phenomenology. So think about talking about coastal flooding in the Gulf of Mexico. We're talking about extreme heat in the United States Southwest. And through engagement with communities we might not otherwise engage with, like the clergy, for example, we're starting to talk about what products and services are needed. It also gives us a chance to have dialogues on issues like coastal erosion in places like Alaska with tribal communities, indigenous communities, and really build in and incorporate indigenous and traditional ecological knowledge. And the third area the fourth area rather, is the co-development of some solutions with international stakeholders, and one that we're quite proud of and that we rolled out, in fact, at COP26 in Glasgow in November, is joining the international partnership of the Local 2030 Islands Network, where we are starting to develop specific and co-develop specific products for some of the vulnerable small island communities in the Pacific and the Caribbean by integrating climate data and information into their coastal and marine resource management strategies. So those are just a few examples of breaking down those barriers between private sector, public sector, globally, and with many of our NGO colleagues as well.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Rick, for highlighting these, really great examples, in terms of, bringing the private sector and public sector together through these kind of data partnerships, the cooperative research agreements you mentioned. Wind energy is a great example of, collaborating within the different government agencies. You mentioned equity, the social aspect, bringing in different kind of stakeholders in these climate and equity roundtables. And finally, the collaboration in the kind of with international stakeholders through the 2030 Local Islands Network. Those are all great examples. We always talk about these, these great examples, and then we run out of time. So, in the interest of time, I would like to ask you to just briefly answer, this final question, which is really about now connecting what we've just talked about with the 2030 goals. And I mean, you have all alluded to this, the need to connect with the tough targets in terms of marine protection, 30 by 30, the SDG 14 and other goals. So very briefly, and also by way of summarizing, Tiago, I would like to ask you first in terms of the 2030 goals and where we need to go. I mean, at the Oceano Azul Foundation, you have several initiatives that are directly linked to the 2030 goals. I mean, you mentioned a couple, but you also have all the work you do on the marine protected areas, for example. You work a lot on sustainable fisheries. Briefly, where do you see the biggest opportunities for collaboration to meet the ambitious 2030 targets?
Thank you very much, Martin. I have to say that we see progress on marine protected areas, and marine protected areas are probably the tool that we need to save what's left in the ocean, because we can act fast if we do that. But at the same time, I think that we will not save the ocean if we don't change the economy. That is probably the biggest goal of our generation. And so if the economy is the reason why our ocean is within a deep crisis as our climate is, or our biodiversity is, we need indeed all to contribute to this new blue economy, decarb economy. And I think the opportunities are great in that area, and that it is very important that we will develop this new concept of natural capital. Natural capital needs to become mainstream economics. That's the only way when nature will be part of the economy, and in that regard, nature then will be preserved and will probably be even developed for the all ecosystem services that we need and which are the basis for our manufacturing economy. Now, what I think that is tremendous important at the end of the day is really to develop the capabilities that we need for all this to happen. And of course, we need to invest a lot in marine science. We need to invest a lot in assessing blue carbon and in other areas, because that's the way we will be able to have all the metrics, like Karen referred, in relation to risk assessment, that will change the finance perspective over nature, and that we will have then nature being an important part of the economy of the future. I truly believe that is what is going to make and of course we, Oceano Azul Foundation, we work on that. We work with international economists. We are ready to help in any matter that can contribute to this idea of having natural capital as a key element of our economies.
Thank you so much, Tiago. You highlighted, the need to bring climate and the blue economy together for this kind of decarbonization agenda, the need for natural capital accounting, bringing it to mainstream economics, and investing in marine science. Also, by way of concluding, Rick, I also wanted to ask you, you mentioned already the ambitious agenda you have in the Biden administration. One of the first acts was rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, and also at COP26, the US announced that it would join the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. There are plans to expand offshore wind deployment, as you mentioned, by 2030. So there's clearly momentum for climate and ocean action in the US to meet these ambitious targets this decade. So briefly, where do you see the biggest opportunity for collaboration to meet the ambitious 2030 targets?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to mention our entry into the Paris Agreement, re-entry, also the High-Level Ocean Panel. Thank you for bringing that up. Got to mention the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development as well, an important initiative within the IOC that we see as a motivator for doing a lot of this. I couldn't agree more with respect to the incorporation of natural capital valuation in the equation, and also incorporation of blue carbon into nationally determined contributions is an important piece of this. Within the U.S., a little bit more focus specifically on what we're doing. We have two important things to deal with in the United States, but it's not unique to the United States. The time between billion-dollar disasters is now down to 18 days. In the United States alone, that number was closer to 85 days just 30 years ago. So how do we address this challenge? And we see it in terms of building a climate-ready nation in the United States, a concept that I think is equally applicable across the globe. And the main point of the concept of a climate-ready nation is less about hunkering down and dealing with and adapting to, and if you will, merely becoming resilient, but actually prospering and taking advantage of, in a fully sustainable manner, the changes that we see coming down the pike associated with climate change. At COP26, there were several key points that were raised. Ambition was one, the role of science was one, and the role of ocean and the ocean economy in building out the climate-ready globe, if you will. So I think all of those folded into the concept of actually in developing a new mode of activity, a new mode for society and our economy associated with the pending changes we see coming with climate change.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Rick. You highlighted the need to, be more proactive, to be a climate-ready nation, to deal with, the major disasters that are happening, but also really integrating the ocean economy better into the wider economy, and really harnessing the blue economy. We're running out of time, but Karen, very briefly, you mentioned already you're taking a lot of important practical steps, at the Alliance. Finance is a key component. You mentioned that, the World Ocean Initiative. Finance is also one of our 3 key levers of change. And at the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, you have this goal to drive $500 million of investment into coastal marine natural capital by 2030. Where do you see, and very briefly, where do you see the biggest opportunity for collaboration to meet the 2030 targets?
Thanks, Martin. Well, I actually think we've got to quadruple that target for ourselves. We need to stop talking in the hundreds of millions and start talking in the billions and trillions. The biggest opportunity is, I think, echoing Tiago and Rick, we need a new asset class in the world, in the economy, and that is the ocean and biodiversity. And we've got to couple that with tackling the climate crisis. The two are two sides of the same coin. That is our opportunity. And if we don't break down the silos in order to do that, if we don't work together, we will be lost. So I'm optimistic we can do it, and looking forward to working with partners to get there as quickly as possible. Time is not on our side, but we can do it if we step forward together.
Yes, we definitely can, Karen. So thanks a lot. And thanks a lot to all of the panelists for your great contribution. Just by way of kind of summarizing, I mean, we mentioned that, ocean action is really crucial this decade, given the need to meet the 2030 targets, but also given all these opportunities that, for example, Rick highlighted through the new blue economy, also bringing in the different stakeholders on civil society, as Tiago mentioned, the need to bring the marine science into this conversation. And of course, Karen, you highlighted the need to bring finance and to make sure that we really raise the required finance, potentially through a new asset class in terms of ocean biodiversity. We heard a lot of examples of innovative partnerships. Rise Up for Ocean, Local 2030, Island Network, the Sea Change Impact Finance Facility, and so on. We heard a lot of great opportunities to really harness, these opportunities for collaboration to really connect those silos that we currently see. So thank you again to the panelists for a great conversation. Please stay tuned for the next session of the 9th Annual World Ocean Summit. Hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.